Guild Wars 2, the game that inspired me to monitor the price of gold ore rather than monitoring the price of Bitcoin over a decade ago. Had I done the Bitcoin option, probably wouldn't be making this video. But when it comes down to it, my goal remains the same. I've returned after a decade, older, not so much wiser, and with a lot more responsibilities to try to obtain the Legendary Greatsword Eternity, which requires us not only to make one legendary weapon, but two of them. Now, as we begin our journey, and we've made some progress along the way, we're hoping to this episode really dive in to some of the alternative aspects of the game. We'll be taking a look at a little bit of the story, trying out a little bit of the crafting, and it's going to be a much different experience from what we've done so far in this series. But I hope you'll join me as we continue to make progress towards eternity. So, when it comes down to it, we have to go through the rules. Now, we can only use gold that we've obtained on this character, as at the previous episode we had around 7 gold. We will be using some, but not as much as I thought this episode to level our crafting. We can use another crafter, but we still have to get the skills up to max on this character. Only mats farmed by this character may be used, and we have to complete the area before continuing. That will also apply to cities. We cannot beg for gold or get gifted gold by other people, and they've added a new rule whereby we will not be using the starter kits from the Wizard's Vault. We will, however, be able to get other resources that could directly tie to us making the progress. Now, when it comes to it, we will be working on weaponsmithing and armor smithing for the purposes of obtaining eternity. So in this episode, it's going to kind of be 2 sections. We're going to have the section focusing on story, where I'll actually be doing pretty much a soft recap of the Chapter 1 personal story introduction. And then we'll also have a second part where I talk about a little bit of crafting, what I remember of crafting, and basically some of the changes we're going to make going into this character and trying to get a legendary. But first we have to head to Divinity's Reach, which is the major capital in our starting zone. Each race has its own little starting zone, and for the human race, this is basically it. Of course, in major cities, you only really have points of interest, along with some vistas and waypoints, so you don't get a lot of EXP. I think we gained around 2/3 of a level from running around the map, so it's not a XP heavy episode. We're not going to be gaining a lot of levels, although crafting will give us some decent experience. One thing I have always liked about the Guild Wars cities is the fact that they have very nice integration with the events and what's going on. So as you can see, it's currently the Christmas event, so the whole city is kind of wrapped up as a Christmas event. And the way Guild Wars kind of places its vendors and NPCs and things makes the cities feel pretty big and expansive and alive. They're some very impressive MMO cities, even though obviously you don't technically end up using them a lot. Most people end up using Lion's Arch. But we'll begin the story and take things from there. So when it comes to the story in Guild Wars, what I really want to focus on is the personal story. So the personal story is your Chapter 1. When you started your character had a couple of things that they had to kind of choose, whether they're from the slum, whether they're from the circus, whether they're from here. And these actually affect your Chapter 1 the most. To see all of these different classes and races, their Chapter 1 is primarily affected by the choices you made there. It's kind of like a more personal introduction. Now, this is obviously prior to games like Final Fantasy really kicking off, but this change in having a story style mission, questline, and approach was something that was very different to me when I switched over from World of Warcraft. So I'm going to give you a summary of what happens in Chapter 1, and we'll kind of take things from there. So in regards to Chapter 1, we start off with the Perils quest. We meet our friend Quinn, who is part of kind of like the bandit gang that we are part of. I would say a group of thieves and mercenaries. They are headed by a bandit by the name of Two Blade Pete, who has essentially asked us to find Alice, one of our accomplices, and we have to go take out a rival faction called the Widowmakers to free her. We free Alice and obviously return back to Pete, who continues to threaten Quinn and kind of gives us a bit of attitude about everything that happened. Overall, it's an interesting introduction. It's a good attempt to try and give us some kind of background, but obviously with a character like Quinn, who's our childhood best friend, things are always a little bit difficult. However, we do meet Logan Thackeray, my favorite character in the game, because of how studly and amazing he is, and basically we begin kind of getting some insight into the continuation. Thackeray basically is trying to get us to help him with preventing this bandit gang from causing any more mayhem, and in doing so we'll gain reputation with him to the point where he will then ask us to partake in the true kind of like story mode of the game, the true first story of Guild Wars 2. So after getting Quinn out of trouble with Two-Blade Pete, we get charged with heading to the Apothecary to meet with Quinn to ensure that the Apothecary is essentially working on creating a different poison for us. This poison powder will become more relevant later on, but we meet Quinn outside the Apothecary, and essentially we get tasked with killing the head Apotheker. Because of that, we decide instead that we'll defend her against our own gang, and in doing so we kind of irritate Two-Blade Pete. Because of this, essentially, we stop the poison powder production, or find out about it, and Thackeray asks us to essentially get more information on this situation. So he's a little bit not convinced by essentially how we are going to proceed, and asks us to get a little bit more information about what the plans are for the poison powder, what is the bandit gang actually going to plan. And in meeting with hunky, chunky, lovely Logan Thackeray, we get introduced to a character called Countess Anise, who will become more relevant later on in some of the other stories that will take place. Next, after saving the Apothecary, we move on to going undercover. This requires us to sneak into a bandit hideout that players may have encountered while they were questing through the area. While sneaking into the bandit hideout, we get tasked with a couple things to do to prove our worth to Crusher Dan. This includes things like defeating lizards inside the cave, defeating a very large veteran Skrit, and essentially just performing a whole bunch of tasks for him before we're kind of allowed to actually get inside the cave and do the work. We also get given a disguise that kind of disguises us, but obviously people who know us may still recognize us. Once we've done the tasks for Crusher Dan, we then get told that we need to meet up with Doc Howler. Doc Howler is an assistant to Two-Blade Pete, who will be working on the poison and producing not only the poison in a viable format, but also creating an antidote to the poison that we, as the bandit gang, will be taking to prevent ourselves from coming under its effects. She tasks us with finding some resources, and we do so, mainly just finding a plant, and in the process we manage to make conversation with Alice again, the person we'd saved earlier on in the story. She asks us a bit on our position within the process, and essentially asks us if we kind of side with dismantling the Queen, what kind of political ideals on a very soft level that we resonate with, and it doesn't really matter too much how you answer her, but essentially she discovers that it's you, and you have a little bit of a heart-to-heart about where the bandit gang is kind of heading into. Once we've done that, we then obviously report back to Logan Thackeray to advise him that we are obviously aware of what the plans are, that they plan on poisoning the well, taking the antidote, and then preventing themselves from suffering from the effects so they can steal, loot, and essentially, finish up everything. Once we've done that, Logan Thackeray asks us to make a choice. Either we save our childhood friend Quinn, or we save the city. I always feel these choices are a little bit strange because you haven't really had time in an MMO and after 2 or 3 quests to really kind of be like, this is my best friend Quinn. And although they tell you and you get a little bit of insight into the childhood, I feel like this decision could have at least popped up a tiny bit later. Even after the next 1 or 2 quests, it would have been just slightly better. Just to give you maybe another 20 minutes with Quinn, a couple more cutscenes, just to kind of make the impact of his potential death, more meaningful. But either you choose to save him, or you choose to save the city. Either way, the outcome is mainly the same. You end up being tasked with taking out Doc Howler or Crusher Dan, depending on which one you chose. Doc Howler if you chose to save the city, Crusher Dan if you chose to save Quinn. And once you've done that, you will then be tasked with taking out Two-Blade Pete. Now in the process of saving the city, we unfortunately lost Quinn, who is our best friend. So it was quite devastating towards us as a character and is a crucial kind of character developing moment for us. Of course, like I said, as players, it's neither here nor there, at least for me. Like I said, I would have loved to have had a little bit more time with him in kind of respect of the character. We finally get to the final section, which is Breaking the Blade, where we meet Logan at the inn and begin to perform a ambush on Two-Blade Pete. Right, Alice comes to chat with us. She reveals that she's planning on leaving the bandit gang and trying to find a normal life, which I guess is a little bit of a trade-off for having to kill and defeat our friend. But yes, ultimately at the end of the day, we are tasked with taking out Two-Blade Pete. Once we have taken out Two-Blade Pete, we are then told that we have done a great service for the city Divinity's Reach, and we'll be reported back to the Queen, who will give us some commendations, and that serves as the basis of the opening of the actual story of Guild Wars 2, which is where the Queen tasks us to begin investigating matters in the realm. Now, like I said, the opening story is altered depending on your race, class, and of course the choices you made. For example, if I had chosen the circus, I wouldn't be involved with the bandit gangs. Instead, I would be involved with a bit of a mystery around my parents. So it's nice that it changes. It's not meant to be super long or super direct or have any great overarching narratives, but no matter which regional quest you choose or story elements, you will always meet the designated head of your region. So in this case, it's always Logan Thackeray that you'll end up talking to, and Countess Anise. But that's not a problem for me, because talking to Logan Thackeray is a pleasurable experience with his cool armor, great hair, and his pretty good demeanor. He's quite a good character, I find, even with the limited grounds that the personal story gives you, and he develops really nicely later on, which we'll see. But for now, we finished the quest, and we're going to head on to the crafting. So, when it comes to crafting, 2 important things before we get into the whole process. Firstly, you want to be near both a trading post and your crafting vendors. There's a couple places throughout every major city. There's never ever really just one. And the reason why you want to go to these hubs is because a lot of the times you're going to be buying resources, jumping back to the vendor to train, buying resources, etc. You have to train or manufacture or produce crafted materials at a hub. So you cannot actually just do it yourself out in the wild. You have to be at a crafting station. Now, GW2 Crafts is a website that I used long ago. There may be a better one, and if you know, you can leave it in the comments. But GW2 Crafts is a website that's great because it gives you guides on how to actually level your professions. So it lets you get guides. These guides really help you in establishing a lot of stuff. For example, they help you in establishing that you need to buy certain resources. So to level from level 0 to 75 on this character, I have to buy all these resources in this list. And then it actually tells you how you can get that EXP up in the most gold efficient way, or there or thereabouts. There's also 2 guides, a normal guide and a faster guide. At low levels, you don't really need a guide. Like, it's nice, it saves you some gold. But if you're someone who's just picking up resources all the time and immediately processing them or crafting them or just doing your stuff, generally your level 0 to like 250 doesn't really need a lot of effort. Guild Wars gains crafted EXP in 2 very distinct methods, and we'll talk about that a little bit now. But this guide or this website is especially great for later level crafting, which is something I really suggest. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be buying the majority of these mats off of the auction house. As you guys know, I've been pretty much liquidating every single material that we get. So I'm going to be buying the majority of them off of the trading post. That will fill out my delivery box. Now I'll do the net total effect at the end, but we did get some interesting loot boxes and a fair chunk of money from the story. So you'll see that the net effect is we actually made a very slight profit this episode. But basically it cost for my weaponsmithing 1 gold 64. And for my armor smithing, about 66 silver to level them both to 79. Now you can see this for the weaponsmithing, and then we'll move on to the armor smithing. Weaponsmithing or weapon making, whatever weapon profession you have, whether it's artificer, huntsman, weaponsmithing, etc., will always be more expensive to do than the armor counterpart, because your weaponsmithing is your most important. Whatever weapon crafter you have is most important, because weapons determine damage, which determines success in an MMO. Now, gaining EXP in your crafted professions amounts to doing 2 things. The first is processing materials, which if you're a new player or someone who isn't big into the crafting scene, this is the majority of where you'll get your EXP, because most players will craft stuff. They'll craft standard axes, they'll craft standard materials, they'll refine materials, and for most players who are just starting the game, this will be where you get the majority of your EXP. However, the discovery function is the cheapest and better way to get the majority of your EXP, because A, discoveries, aka discovering a new type of item, gives you a ton of EXP for your crafting profession, and B, because of that, you can actually discover items which could have some value later on. Now, refining or your standard processing is like turning copper ore into copper ingots. Discovery is, for example, when you discover different types of items. Guild Wars 2 has an inscription system. And I need to explain the gearing system a little bit before I can explain the crafting system. But Guild Wars 2 works off of inscriptions. Inscriptions, cut long story short, are the stats that gear will have. So for example, if you create a might dagger, that dagger will have precision and power. If I create a maligned dagger, or use a maligned inscription for that dagger instead of a might one, that equipment will have condition damage instead. That's a very simple way to put it, but basically they determine the stats on the gear you have, discovering each individual one. So all 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different types of dagger or shoulder piece or glove, etc. gives you a chunk of EXP. And it's one of the best ways to gain EXP for your profession. So whenever you see the ability to craft inscriptions, whether you're following a guide or not, craft those inscriptions, take those inscriptions, go straight to your discovery section, and immediately discover some new items. While we are leveling up our crafted professions, you will also notice that we get a ton of EXP from crafting. So every time your craft levels up, so let's say from like 0 to 1, you get EXP for that craft. So when a craft goes from 0 to 79, I'm essentially gaining like a whole level. Now this EXP for crafting is limited. So I think you can only gain, as far as I remember, 20 levels through crafting, and the game will hard cap you. Whether that's changed or not, people can let me know in the description, but it's definitely something that existed when I first started the game. At least I think I'm remembering correctly. While we are working on weaponsmithing and armorsmithing, you'll see the items I'm buying now for armorsmithing. We are also going to be scrapping and selling those items that we make. The majority of them will sell for below what we bought the individual materials for, but some of them will sell for about the same. Most of those will be things like might, because salvaging those items can give you might inscriptions, which a lot of players use in the mystical toilet, which we'll talk about in a different episode when we get there. But the Mystic Forge inscriptions can be used to create other inscriptions. It's a hell of a process. I will say the list of items needed for the armorsmithing was really quite big and pretty nuts. So that was also something that was a little bit shocking, but you know, it is what it is. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it was a pretty relatively smooth process, and getting to 79 was not expensive. It cost us, like I said, around about 2 gold, 2 silver in total, which is fairly straightforward. And getting both into 79 is pretty nice, because if I do need to, I can craft 1 or 2 things that maybe we might need to use. Although, if you know by now, engineer and obviously anything to do with armorsmithing and weaponsmithing don't really go together. So it's an unfortunate side effect of me wanting to try something new, but wanting to make Eternity. But it's not a big problem. The gear we get from events, missions, quests will all be more than fine. So that kind of covers the crafting section. I'll go into crafting in some other videos, maybe like a one-on-one on crafting, how to choose your profession, advanced crafting, etc. I think one of these videos may even be out. But I think crafting and knowing how to level crafting and do crafting properly is so crucial to Guild Wars that it's pretty insane. But yeah, we'll wrap up crafting on this character, and then we'll kind of tally up the episode. Because A, it's been really, really long, and we've done a lot of admin this episode, I would say. But B, I think also it's just nice to go through some of the things that we need to do. I don't know if I'll do more of these types of videos, maybe story recaps separate or something, but I don't really want to, in the series, cover things like crafting and story in such detail, at least regularly, unless people like it. But I don't really want to cover it in such detail, because we will be A, doing it in other videos, but B, also I think it's just something that you do in the background. So I may mention it in videos, but I won't be showing you so much like I am now, like buying the items, going through the listing, etc. We made 27 silver this episode, largely from selling these story reward items and crafted items and stripping of some mats. We also gained 4 levels in total, 4.5, mainly from exploration, half a level, and then 4 levels from crafting, which was really nice. So we're now officially beyond the halfway point, which is really quite cool, to really be halfway to max level. We have the Wizard's Vault. Won't be using the starter kits as mentioned in the beginning of the video, but you can change the objectives to being PvE only, which I did do. Thank you very much to that comment, because it is going to help us to fill up that vault quicker, which we will be using in future. And like I said, we got some levels and skill points, etc. One thing I will note, next episode, we are definitely stepping back into the zones. We have, I believe, 2 zones that I definitely want to do. The first one is, I think, the final one of this area, the Kirathi Wilds, I think it's called. I'll have to double check, but yeah, we're definitely going to go there next, because it's right up our level. Really good. There we go, the Harathi hinterlands, sorry. And then we'll go to Lion's Arch, and probably also get into the next zone after that, which is exciting because that has a world boss I really like. But that's it for me. See you guys in the next one. Till then, bye.